Hi! In this tutorial, we're going to work with Spring Boot controllers, and so we'll be creating a simple web application. My name is Shad Sluter, and I'll be your guide through this course, which is called Web Development with Java Spring Boot. And so what we're trying to do is cover all of the pieces to make you a web developer. So this is the index of the course, and we're on part 2 right now, which is the Model View Controller. We're about ready to start making our first controller in the next few minutes. So by the time you're done with this lesson, we're going to create great apps such as Hello World in plain text. We're also going to use a Thymeleaf template so you can see that we have a more formatted Hello World. We're going to print some people. So this means that we're going to have to create some data, and then with our Thymeleaf templates, we're going to create a table. And then we're finally going to create just a controller event that will produce JSON formatted data, which is like a REST service. And so all of this is going to involve programming a controller, which is what we're going to code right now. So I'm getting into the code editor. You can see that I have a project already created called Topic 1.1. Let's go ahead and collapse that. We're going to make a new project. So let's go to File and choose New Spring Boot Project. So the first thing I need to do is tell the computer what kind of properties my project is going to have. So I'm going to name the project as Topic 2-1. And then we're going to keep the Maven and the 11 for Java as our two targets. Down below, I'm going to give this a description so I know what it's supposed to be about. So we're going to create some pages to demonstrate how to use a controller. And then for the group, I'm going to use my name, so .com or com.shadsluter, and that's also going to be the package that I'm going to create. So update your project to look similar to this. Let's go ahead and click Next. Next is the project dependencies. So I'm going to use the same dependencies that I did in the previous project. You can either search for them, like for instance if I'm interested in Thymeleaf. So another one that I used was called Spring Boot DevTools. And a third one that I want to choose is for Spring Web. Okay, so I got all these three, and now I'm going to click Finish. All right, let's see what's going on here. I've got this new folder over on the left side, so I'm going to open up the folder called Source Main Java, and then the package, and then I have my application. So this is the only Java file we have so far, and this is where we're going to start. So I'm going to be creating multiple files in this project, and I want Spring Boot to be able to find all of them. So I need to put in a line here called @ComponentScan. Now you're probably wondering, what does component scan mean? Well, we're going to tell it which package is our root package, and then from there we're going to look all packages below when it goes to try to find another object and see if it can import it. Now you can see that component scan is an unknown item, so if I hover over it, you're going to have this import command. So if you spelled it correctly, you'll get the import, and then we have the error goes away. If you expand line 3, you can see that we're doing something called annotations. Now right away you might say, what are you doing, Shad? You're typing these @ symbols. What do they mean? So anything with an @ symbol is called an annotation. So let's talk about some annotations that you can expect to see in a Spring Boot program. So here's an example of a program or a class that has some annotations. You can see at the top there's an @ symbol, and it says this is a REST controller. And then we have another mysterious enable auto configuration, and then further down you can see request mapping. So all of these are considered annotations, and they're not just comments. They're actually things that make Spring Boot stand up and take notice. These are going to be treated as specific parts of the code. And so we're going to take a look at each of these as they come up. So for example, we just created this component scan item, and I gave you the brief definition that says this is going to be the scope of where Spring Boot is going to look for other files in our project. But there are a lot of notations. There are so many notations. As a matter of fact, it's difficult to have like a grasp of all of them. And so it's better to just kind of wait until they become necessary. So you can see that I have 4 groups here, and you're going to see all of these eventually in the course that we're studying. So we're going to be creating a new class in a moment called a controller. And a controller is going to have the annotation at the top that says this class is a controller. And it is used to intercept and direct like URL requests, and it's going to display other pages. So in the MVC format, the controller is a vital part of your page. So we'll be typing this in just a second. This here is an annotation that says we've got a controller. And you can see that it has some more data behind it that it tells us what we're expecting. This particular controller will produce the result you see below. It's going to get a specific product, and product number 72, and display it in JSON formatted text. So this is what your browser would look like based on how we program the controller here. So we'll see lots of examples of controllers. Let's get to a controller right now. So I'm going to create a new package in my project. So I'm going to right click and choose new and choose package. So the new package is going to be called .com or com.shadsluter.controllers. And this is where we can put one or more controllers. So inside of this new package, let's go ahead and right click and choose add a new class. And we'll name this class as Hello World Controller. So this obviously is just for some fun. The controller can have any name. It doesn't have to have the word controller in it even, but it's just a class. Now to indeed make this a true controller, we put in an annotation at the top. So right above the word public class, we type in @controller with a capital C, and then we're going to have to import it. So we import the annotation, and suddenly this class is going to be treated by the Spring Boot framework as a place that is controlling other pages. It is now a controller. All right, so the first event that I'm going to make this controller do is to give a string response to a specific URL. So I'm going to just say test1 is the URL extension. So /test1 is after localhost. So let's create a method. It's called public string. String is the return type. And we'll name this thing as print hello. We're simply going to return a string. So we'll return the string hello world. Anything you want is the message. Doesn't matter if it says hello world or not. And so if this indeed is a controller, it's going to return something. And in this case, it's just a string. Now to make an event actually respond to something in a controller, we need to give it some kind of a indication that this is really responding to a URL. So that is the annotation called getMapping. So getMapping will say look for anything with the string of /test1 in the browser bar. And if this is actually input to the computer, then we're going to trigger this event. Now the response body is the second annotation. So response body means we are going to send the response back to the client as just whatever this string is. So that's the entire body. There's no HTML, there's no JSON formatting. This is just text. Okay, it's time to test this thing out. So I want to make sure that I run this correctly. So I'm going to click on the project name, right click on it, go down to Run As, and then choose Spring Boot App. Okay, let's see if we get any errors. So the Spring banner comes up and it appears that everything is good. So if you did get any errors, go back and double check to make sure that you got everything typed exactly as I showed you. Now, since this is running, I'm going to switch over to my browser, and in the URL, I'm going to type in the word localhost and 8080. Now, this is showing me that the web server responded, but it has a problem. It says you have a 404 error. That means there's no mapping to the root. What mapping did I create? Do you remember? Let's back and look at it again. So the mapping that I was looking for was this, /test1. So I'm going to type that now into the URL. So put in a /test1 and press enter. And voila, we have the Hello World app. So amazing, we have text on the screen. What a congratulations to yourself. You've got your first controller in Spring Boot. Next, we're going to make something more interesting than just plain text. So let's go back over to the left side here and look for resources and the word templates. So this is where we're going to put in a template which can be rendered to the screen in a HTML format. So let's go to File, or create a right click and choose New File. So I'm going to name this file as hellopage.html. Now, honestly, you can use any page name you like, but we're just going to use this one because we know what hello is going to be on it. Okay, so now let's type in some code that will make this work. We're going to first of all put in the doc type that tells us that this is an HTML page. Let's put in an HTML begin and end tag. Now, we're going to be working with Thymeleaf, which is a template language. So that way you can insert data in the middle of your page. And in this case, we need to type in a specific string here. So it's going to be XMLNS:/TH. So this XMLNS:/TH is going to be a reference to an external site. So this is http://thymeleaf.org. So this is the official URL for the Thymeleaf organization. Next, we're going to put in a body. And so we'll do the beginning and the end tag for the body. And then for our page right now, let's put in an H1. So H1 is, of course, a special format. We'll be able to see if HTML code is actually working. So let's do a little bit of formatting, indent a few things, and save it. Now, we have this page, but how do we get it to show? This page is not going to show up unless we tell the controller what to do with it. So to show a page is similar to what we did where we just showed plain text. So I'm going to copy and paste the event that was called test1. And we'll paste it and rename it, calling it test2. And then we're going to take out this response body. Response body is for pure text. This is actually going to try to return the page that we just created. So let's rename the event, calling it show hello page. And then instead of returning the string hello world, I'm going to return the string of the actual file name. So hello page.html is the actual template. We can leave off the HTML, it's assumed, and this should return the hello world page that we just created. So you noticed as soon as I press save, the app recompiled, thanks to the developing tools that we have. I'm going to go back to the app, and I'm just going to try a refresh to make sure it's working. Now, we have a new URL, so I'm going to put in a test2. And this time, we have the page that is the H1 tags. So it seems to be producing an HTML format. Just to confirm that this is working, I'm going to go back into the hello page and add another paragraph tag. So we'll say this is looking really good. So if that actually took place, then let's go ahead and refresh the page. And sure enough, we have the new text. So you can see that we can render two different types of data. We can have a template here like HTML, and then we can also have just plain text. So HTML gives us the option of adding some CSS. So let's go do some formatting. So to make some formatting for our text, the simplest way is just to create some inline styling right at the top of the page. So in the header section, I'm going to create another section called Style. Let's create some formatting styles. So I'll put a star in, first of all, which will change the font for everything on the page. And I'm going to do the font family as Arial. And you can see the auto typing is somewhat helpful. So Arial, Helvetica, and Sans Serif are the three in order. So if you know anything about CSS, then this should be old stuff. The color, let's change the header to be blue. And then for a paragraph, let's change it to italic style. So I guess actually H1 is what I used. So I'll change from H2 to H1. Okay, let's see if this did anything. So I'm going to save this and then switch to the page and go back to the test2. And sure enough, I can see the CSS has taken effect. So now that I know that I can use CSS, let's go ahead and dress it up a little bit. I'm going to put a div around the hello world area, and that div will be called a class of title box. And then the purpose of that, of course, is to be able to modify that in CSS. So up in the CSS, let's put a dot title box as our selector. So that way it'll affect any class with that name. So my intention here is to put a border around it. So we're going to make a box with a rounded corner. So we have to use border radius. And then we'll make it so it fits the content. And then we'll put a little padding so it fits nicely. So check all this out. Let's save it and check to see if the update actually works. So here's the app. And let's go ahead and refresh the page. And sure enough, we have Hello World now in a box. So next I'm going to show you what Thymeleaf is all about, because up until this point we've had just static pages. Thymeleaf allows you to take a message or some kind of a property of an object from the controller and then dynamically create a page. So in this case, I'm going to allow the user to substitute Hello World for an item called message. So we're going to have to define this message in the controller. But you can see here that we're using th.text So th is for the Thymeleaf template language, and we're going to accept a property called message. So this message is going to have to be defined in the controller that calls this page. Well, let's go look at that controller and see what happened. So the class that we use to send data from a controller into a Thymeleaf page is called a model, and that's the data type. So I'm going to insert model with a capital M, and then the lowercase m is the instance of this class. Now let's take a look at the properties of what model has. So if I type model and a dot, you can see that there are many things that are predefined in it. So what I'm looking for is one called add attribute. And the attribute can be any kind of a item. It can be an object, it can be a string, and really it's up to your imagination of what you might want to pass into a Thymeleaf page. So in this case, I have to use a string called message. That's just because I chose message in the Thymeleaf template. But once I have a string called message, that's kind of like the tag, the actual value for the message is what comes after the comma. And so you can make up a phrase. I'm going to say, have a great day. So this will substitute hello world with have a great day. So let's check to see if this actually works. So let's save this and let the computer recompile our app. So let's go back here and refresh now. So I'm going to push the refresh button, and you can see that hello world has now been superseded by have a great day. Let's go check that template out again and see if we really understand what we're looking at. So I'm switching back here and going back to hello page. So you can see that this item here called text is specifically for a message property of the model. Now, if we don't have a message, then hello world will come through as the default. So now you can see that we have this MVC pattern in play. So you've seen we have the view in front of you right now. This is the code for the Thymeleaf page. That's the view. Then we have the controller, which is this class here. This is what is actually controlling what gets shown. And now we have the third part. We can see the model. And literally this object called model is reserved in Spring Boot to be able to do this kind of a thing. Now you're free to add more things to the model if you like. So I had message as a string. Let's add something called rating, and you notice I purposely choose a integer here. So it is not a string, but we'll make up a rating called 99, and then I'm going to make another string and I'll call it report. Now it's up to you if you want to use these in the next screen. So let's go back into hello page. So here is your challenge. I want you to take a look at the code here and see if you can integrate another template item. So I've shown you how to put message in here, put rating in somewhere, and in addition to the rating, go ahead and put the report in somewhere. So decide how you want this to look any place on the page. So I'm going to include the report and the rating here down below the paragraph. So I'm going to say here's a news report, and then on the next line down we're going to say a paragraph, and the paragraph will contain the contents of report. So report is a property of the model. Next I'm going to say something about this rates as a, and then I'm going to put in the number. Now you notice I don't have to put in a paragraph for every kind of a thing. You can use divs, and in this case I'm going to choose a span. So that'll be an inline number along with the rest of the sentence. Let's see if I did it right. So I'm going to save this and let's rerun the app. Okay, so the app is running. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. And you can see that we have a news report and then we have a 99 at the bottom. So it looks like my app is successfully using the model to carry a couple of strings and an integer. So now let's see if we can throw some errors and see what would be commonly a problem for new programmers. So let's say in hello page I accidentally put in a space in here. So the file name doesn't match obviously with one of the items in my templates folder. So I can see that recompiled. Let's go ahead and refresh the page. And now we're going to have an error. So we see that we have a 500 error, and it says here in the description, it says you may not have a template, might not match. And so in more details it says hello page did not exist. So even though these white label error pages are like massive and they have tons of lines that are irrelevant to what you're really looking for, you need to find the places where you can see the actual problem. And so this one here is obvious. A name doesn't exist for a file. that I actually wanted to show. So I would go back and I would resolve that with renaming this. Let's see what happens if I try to add the HTML tag. What will that do? So I'm going to refresh the page, and you can see that the HTML tag is optional. Let's see what happens if I have a rating here in incorrect. So let's say I accidentally spelled this with a capital R. What do you suppose will happen on my page? Let's come back over to here and refresh to find out. So you can see that the rating fell. It didn't exist, so it just ignored it. Next, I'm going to add another endpoint and show you how to add the model and the view both in one object. So let's create a new get mapping for something called test3. In this case, the return type is called model and view. So you can see that the name itself says we're going to use both in one class. Let's name the function as print hello. Actually, I'll have to rename that, but we'll get that in a minute. We're going to then create a new instance of the model and view. Let's just call it MV as the name. And we'll just make a new instance of it with the empty constructor. So just like we did with the model, we can add items to it. So I'm going to type in mv dot and say add an object. So let's add some of the same properties. Let's use message for our string. Let's make a distinct message, something a little bit different. So I'm going to say, in this case, have a super day. And then for the rating, I'm going to pick something else, such as 55. Now, what's different here is the next item. We're going to say mv.setViewName. And so we can say that this is going to actually go to the same view. It's going to go to the hello page. And then when we're finally done, we can return the MV object. So we're accomplishing pretty much the same thing, but we're using a different class. It's called the model and view class, and it's an option if you want to. You can programmatically set the page that you want to show. Well, it's time to test it. So let's save this, let it recompile, and then we'll go refresh the browser. So here's the browser. Let's see if test2 still works. I'm going to change the 2 to a 3 because we now have a 3 endpoint. And you can see that we're using the same view, but now we're displaying it with a different method in the controller. Next, I want to show you how to use what's called a request parameter. So this is where you can put information into the URL. So let's copy and paste test2, and let's rename it as test4 now. So what we're going to ask for is a new function. So I'm going to say show hello page 4 as my name of this function or this method. Now we're not going to need the message property here. We're not going to define it in the controller. Instead, we're going to ask for it from the browser's URL bar or the address bar. And that's called a request param. So we'll use one of the attributes at request param. And then we're going to specifically say look for a parameter that is tagged as message. And then we'll accept that as a string value. And then put a comma, and then we'll go on with the model as we did before. So next, I'm going to take that request parameter and then include it in with the model. So instead of doing the model as a straight string, I can get it from the URL. So let's do model.addAttribute, and we'll call it again message, the same attribute. But this time we're using the variable message, which comes from the string that was defined up there in the input parameters. So we switch over to the browser. You can see that I have test3 up and running. Let's go ahead and put in test4 and see what happens. So we have an error. So what went wrong here? It says here the required request parameter called message was not found. String was not present. So you can see that if you forget to do something as a user, then you can actually cause your program to crash. What we forgot was we need to have a request parameter. So to do that, you put in a question mark in your browser and you type in message equals and then something. So I'm just going to put in a nonsense string and press enter. And then you can see that this parameter was passed in to the model. So if we wanted to put in something really nice, we could say hello and then press enter and you get hello. So this is how you read from a line that has lots of variables. So you're welcome to put in more. So if I wanted to put up here something like top score, I would put an and symbol. And since top score was not even considered by the controller, it's just ignored. But you can put in multiple items here. So you can say things like name and then put in your name. Now all of these could be read as request parameters. You can see that the only request parameter that I was interested in was called message, and the others are ignored. So in the next video, I'm going to show you how to create a list of things like in a table. We're going to pass through a model of the person class, and we'll be able to do actual for loops inside of a Thymeleaf template. We're also going to generate some of this JSON text, which is a different kind of a controller, but that's still ahead. So if you like what you see, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the upcoming videos, and come back to class, and with a little bit of time, you can become a professional web developer. Thanks for watching.